everybody. It's a nice Tuesday evening here. Now that the weather conditions have improved somewhat over my area. I'm meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Hope you had a good-looking day here. We had actually quite a bit of rain out around my way, on the order of about 3/4 of an inch to an inch and a quarter. Couple of heavier downpours late this afternoon. Looks like very briefly a couple of thunderstorm cells popped up that produced some hail. I got a couple of people letting me know that there was some hail in a few spots, but other than that, we're done. The flooding hasn't been a big problem here either. The rain came and went. There's no snow cover on the ground to worry about in the coastal areas anyway. You have to go way up inland to start dealing with that. Freezing rain across much of central and northern New England. That is also coming to an end, and now we can start moving ahead to weather conditions improving as a whole. There's still some precipitation going on, and I'll just show you on the radar this evening as of 6 o'clock. The main area of heavy rain has moved out to the east off the New England coast, and we've got this other band, the last band of showers rolling through upstate New York down to the coastline, and then as we move into western Pennsylvania and western New York State, we start to get into some snow showers there as the colder air begins to move on in. So that storm is pretty much done. We do, however, if I can find my radar, and I think just did, we'll go to the west. And here's the Pacific Northwest, which is where the other action that we have going on this evening. There is rain and some very heavy mountain snows. I happened to pull up a forecast for, oh, now I forgot where it was, in northwestern Washington. I gotta pull this up, and it must be in some park there. What was it? Hurricane Ridge, I believe it's called, and it's in the northwestern corner of Washington State, west of Seattle, and there's elevation here, obviously, with the elevation that was up at around 5,000 feet, I believe, as I checked it out. Yeah, this was a forecast for 11 miles south-southwest of Hurricane Ridge, Washington, elevation of 4,895 feet. And they have a winter weather advisory up for this area, but what I found funny was the fact that when I was looking at the snow amounts, winter weather advisory for 12 to 18 inches of snow tonight, 6 to 10 inches of, I'm sorry, it was for 12 to 18 inches of snow during the daytime on Tuesday, then 6 to 10 additional inches overnight tonight, 3 to 5 during the day Wednesday, another 4 to 8 Wednesday night, another 4 to 8 on Thursday, another 4 to 8 Thursday night, and another 3 to 5 on Friday. And there's snow in the forecast day there for every single day going forward. I mean, that's just, it's amazing. People get all worked up over a coating to a couple of inches in some places, and granted, there isn't a town close by to that location that I showed you, so they probably just have the winter weather advisory up because there's the odd person or two that might drive through there. I don't know what the roadways are like, but I just would be curious as to what the criteria is as far as winter storms are concerned, winter storm warnings, or certainly with the blizzard criteria. But whoa, that's an awful lot of snow over the next 4 or 5 days. So I'm going to move ahead and show you what is going on, and we continue to be in this weather pattern where we are getting cold shots of air coming down out of Canada, but there's no staying power to them because of the fact that we don't really have any blocking going on, and therefore the cold air comes in, hangs around for a couple of days, and then pulls out. Here's the system in the west, which is going to extend rain and snow down into central California throughout much of Oregon and Washington. Some of that cold air with the trough pretty far to the west, cold air from Canada is bleeding down along the west coast with some snows not that far inland, really. As we move into Thursday, there's a low that's coming into coastal Oregon, and models are generating some snows in coastal areas down in Northern California, not in the immediate coast, but just inland of the coast and some of the higher elevations. It would not be a big surprise. And that lasts right into Friday. Meanwhile, here in the east, we've got a high that goes up into southeastern Canada, then finds its way off the Jersey coast, and we start to moderate ahead of the next weather front. Now, one of the things that's happening early next week, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and I really am not putting too much stock into this, but one of the things that's happening is that we have the North Atlantic Oscillation going negative for a couple of days. We also have the EPO going negative, which would favor colder air. And we have the P&A trying to go from a deep negative value, spiking up toward the neutral line, but never quite getting there. And the reason why I bring this up is because the Canadian model with this kind of responded to that development today. And you can see what it does with a wave on a front that goes off the Delaware coast. Actually has it fairly well developed because it has a well-developed upper air feature. I don't believe this, by the way, okay, but I think that's what it's responding to. It's responding to the fact that the models are forecasting that NAO to crash and the P&A to try to come up, the Pacific North America Index, the ridge in the west, to try to come up toward the neutral line. But I don't necessarily think that this is going to work out this way. The just for laughs, the German model kind of did the same thing with this, and this is the new run. I think the new run may have taken it away, so let's see how far out we go. And here's the new run with the German model, and it looks to me like it probably is going to take it away. High trying to push in from the north. This could be in response to the crashing NAO, and it's got a wave down in the northeast Gulf of Mexico. Let me punch up the prior run so you can get an idea of what it did in the prior run. It was kind of like the Canadian, with a slow-moving wave and that cold air building across the top and just sort of collapsing in to the northeast. But again, I really find this highly suspect, so I'm not overly enthused by this notion. In the meantime, in the west, we just continue to see, and I'll back this up, we continue to see, you know, wave after wave of snow and rain coming in into the Pacific Northwest, mostly from Northern California northward, not so much into Central or Southern California. Now, as we move through next week and beyond, you know, weather models have been telegraphing the idea that we are going to start to see a bit of a change and a pattern, let's call it a pattern realignment or a shift. Here's the upper air for later next week, and you can see where the trough is. A bit of a ridge here in the east. This is the middle of next week, and then gradually that trough takes shape down, looks like right along or just east of 90 degrees west, and then it lifts and pulls on through. But you can see that there is a connection here, a teleconnection and a jet stream connection from northern Canada into the eastern part of the United States. The problem is that the ridge off the west coast is off the west coast. It's too far west. With the ridge off that far west, it would suggest that, yeah, you'll get these shots of cold air, but they may not have a lot of staying power. They're going to want to pull out, followed by another shot of cold air. So it looks like that upper trough is trying to set up in a way that, in a fashion somewhat similar to what we had back from mid-December through mid-January, but the change is subtle. Now, I will I did notice that as we go toward the end of that forecast period, the ridge is now coming inland into the west, and that may usher in the cold wintry pattern that has staying power. So we may have to deal with kind of a transient nature as we go into February. Most of the days will be cold, but then when it's time for precip, it may just warm up and rain in most places until we can get that Pacific North America index. We have to get it to go strongly positive if you want to see a more favorable scenario. When they pull up the teleconnection indices, you've got the EPO. In fact, today's run, this is actually based on last night's overnight run. They only update this once a day off the ensembles. But when we look at the teleconnections here from that overnight run, and I would venture to say that the day run is probably not too different, but I want you to notice a couple of things here. First off, there's that crashing NAO for January 29th through the 31st, where it goes briefly negative. And at this point, the EPO is also crashing to negative, and then it accelerates negative. So you're going to have a pretty deeply negative EPO going into the first week of February. So, you know, if you're a winter weather lover, you could put a check mark in that box. The NAO is not a huge factor here. As I've stated many times, I think it's vastly overstated. So we're going to just kind of leave that as an open variable. It would be, you know, if you want a better lock on the winter weather, you probably would want to see this go negative and stay there, but it is forecast to go back positive. It's not strongly positive, it's somewhat positive, and it's only weekly negative here, but we'll just kind of watch it and see what it does. It's, to me, again, it's just sort of the outside variable. It's the PNA that's a problem, the Pacific North America Index, which tries to go, it's sharply negative by Thursday of this week, and then it kind of tries to spike up, but it never quite gets to the neutral line, and then it goes back down and spikes down sharply negative as we go through the first days of February, and after that it begins to trend upward. Now the question is, this last date here is February 6th. Does it continue to trend upward as we go toward February 7th and 8th and then push up into positive territory? Some of the longer range tools suggest that may very well happen, but we want to kind of start to see it, and we may not be in that calendar time frame. So this is going to be basically a state of flux here for a while until we can kind of get all of this in order. But I still think we are going to get into a fairly solid wintry pattern going forward. I don't know that it's going to be of the same magnitude. I've heard some people say that that they are predicting that it is. I've heard some people say it's going to be even colder, which is kind of hard to imagine that it could be as record-breaking as that was. But you know what? I'm not going to make a prediction like that. I'm going to just kind of sit back and wait, let the models play themselves out over the next couple of days and see where they go, because they'll give you the clues. As we move into this weekend and the very first part of next week, we will start to see some genuine clues that have some real value in terms of where all of this is going to wind up. So we will pay very, very close attention to that. Let me join you guys on the board. So just give me 1 second here, and I'll bring my happy little face up to the front. And starting to get also a bit hungry tonight. Here we go. My dinner time is not for another hour or so. So just give me 1 second here. Some of you may see a quick commercial break here, so just have patience and come right back if you do. But in the meantime, let me just say hi to everybody collectively. And Wayne Hilliard made a live session. Been watching the recorded ones. Oh, thank you very much. I appreciate it. You're up in Vermont, try to catch your forecast every day, and you like the detail. Thank you. By the way, I know you guys got some freezing rain during overnight and today from this weather system. Ski conditions in the Northeast have been absolutely terrific, and they are probably not going to get hurt too bad by the freezing rain. that fell. I'm sorry, I just saw that somebody got I did see some hefty snow amounts up in parts of southern Minnesota, up on the order of a foot plus in the Minneapolis area. I just saw somebody's post. Let me see. Oh, there you go. Ryan Kong, the Asian weather boy, you got 14 inches of snow outside your door. Awesome. If you're a snow lover, you are in heaven. Kevin Francis, very icy in northern Vermont today. Very bad road conditions. People driving way too fast. Isn't that the truth? Tam Lewis, hello to you. Ice in Maine, Franklin Taylor, they sure did. Freezing rain went all the way up with this weather system, and that does happen from time to time. In that, with the pattern relaxing the way it is, it's not that there isn't any cold air. It's just that the cold air really doesn't have any staying power, even in places where normally it should have some staying power. But they're going to get cold right back tonight in through Friday and Friday night. So that's a good thing. And I was checking some of the ski reports from up there. I mean, open trails galore, deep bases everywhere. And they may pick up some snow, some scattered snow tomorrow as the upper trough swings on through. So Joe Bastardi saying the pattern change starts around February 2nd. I guess that's, I kind of, I look at it maybe a bit differently in terms of the change. I think the change is a longer process, and we may be actually starting that pattern change this weekend. Now, just remember, be very careful how you interpret that, because pattern changes are not events. They are not moments in time. They are long, grinding processes. We've been through this, before, back from November to December. It can take sometimes weeks for a pattern change to complete from beginning to end. I don't think this one is going to take weeks. I think it may take a week or so, a week or two. And I think that process actually starts this weekend and early next week. It's going to be kind of a stair-step change in the overall pattern, and it might take 2 weeks for us to get to the final place. So the evolution of this is going to be very, very important to watch. So Super Syed, you might have to wait, say past the first week of February. Maybe after about February 7th or 8th, if the pattern reverts to bringing wintertime weather back into the mid-Atlantic states. You're going to have to be patient. And you snow lovers and winter weather lovers are going to have to be very patient in watching this play out. I don't know where it's going to wind up at this point, but I've said many times with these weather patterns, they do tend to rhyme, even if they don't match up exactly in the wintertime. You get that primary pattern, a bit of a break, and then the primary pattern reasserts itself in a different way. Anthony Orr points out the Maddon Julian oscillation monitors the difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti being in warm phases, hence the warmer air cold phase past February 6th or 7th. Yes, in other words, that Maddon Julian oscillation is going to go in what's referred to as phases, I believe, phase 7, 8, and 1, which is very favorable for cold, snowy weather in the eastern part of the United States. So that's going to, that's forecast to occur sometime around February 6th or 7th. So this will all time out at around the same time. So we're just going to have to wait to see where we are when we get there. Nick Cortese, thank you for hitting Super Chat. Really appreciate it, sir. That's a well, it's a little warm for a hot chocolate, so maybe tonight, maybe it will be a cigar for the drive home. Thank you very much. The Maddon Julian oscillation is basically, I have to be honest, I know of it, I don't completely understand it. It's a very technical look when you look at how they figure this whole thing out. In the chart, I have a tough time understanding because it almost looks like a spider's web. But one day, when we're in the off season and I have time to kind of look at this stuff, but it does impact tropical activity in that part of the world, and oftentimes when that Maddon Julian oscillation, I believe when it's in that 781 phase, there's a lot of tropical activity that develops in that part of the world, and that kind of coincides with a deep trough in the eastern part of the United States. But, you know, I have to really kind of sit down and spend some time with it to really understand it. And that I can't do now. It's going to have to come in the off season. Phase 8 of the Maddon-Julian oscillation, what's called the circle of death. When in the circle of death, the MJO has no effect on the pattern. Okay. All right. See, I got a lot to learn about this. This is all, you know, as over the years I have heard of it and I have read some stuff about it, but you know, when you can't do everything, and if you're focused on the short range and you're focused on your area of responsibility, it's hard to spend the time that you need to spend looking at this stuff that's much more technical in nature. And Danielo Yakubov, I'm a very big proponent of the fact that sometimes less is definitely more. Nick Cortez, any big snows coming? No, not in the short range. You cannot, you know, it looks like an early spring the rest of January, finishing up mild, which is unusual. January is supposed to be the coldest month. Do you see big snow potential for February? I don't know. This is not unusual. After the extreme cold that we have, would have been unusual not to have a break, but that's what we are. And you know, I got to tell you, even in this break period, don't misinterpret the fact that we've gotten these days where we've seen temperatures climb up to the 50s to near 60. It's happened twice. Don't compare that with a blowtorch pattern in the east, which is basically dry and warm. This is not that at all. This is quite typical of a winter with a period of variability. There is plenty of cold air. We're going to see that cold air in here the next 3 days. We are getting these cold shots. The problem is that there's nothing in the upper air pattern to hold that cold air in. The highs are going out to our south. They're moving out offshore. Winds are going back to the southwest ahead of the next cold front. You know, that to me is a completely different scenario than from what we had over the last 2 winters as a whole, when you have this sort of strong ridge in the eastern part of the United States, and you wind up being dry with temperatures in the 50s for days and days at a time. To me, to see what we've been having now with these weather fronts approaching is part of a natural winter process. So I don't read that as being unusually warm or unusually anything. It's quite usual to see that. Now, once we play through this and we get into early February, I think we will revert, but we will revert back to that colder, more wintry pattern. Whether that means we'll get another big snowstorm or not, I don't know. That is something I really don't know. It would be unusual to get a second snowstorm, a second big storm. On the other hand, if you've already had one, the odds of you having a second one are actually slightly higher. So you follow what I'm getting at. If you're in a pattern where you've gotten already one snowstorm, it's not a bad idea to dice roll and take the side of the bet that says that we'll get another. I can't forecast that. That's not something that you forecast. That's just guessing. The Weather Channel reference Anthony Orr has taken, as I've called it, the onion of weather. Yes. Thank you, Anthony. You are my guardian. You just like stand guard and just hold defense. I appreciate that. Patricia Patrilak just had high winds here in Lawrenceville Mountain on Route 11 in Pennsylvania. Rain again. Sick of it. You'd rather it snow. The cold air's coming up your way. There were some bands of showers with this upper low that's swinging through, but they will move on. You will see that in short order. Reaver 501. Have I ever ice fished in the Adirondacks? No, I did attempt to ice fish in New Hampshire at Lake Winnipesaukee a couple of years ago, but the -15 temperature and the screaming 25-mile-an-hour wind across the lake had me completely discouraged, and I ran inside and stood inside I literally stood inside the nearest fireplace I could find. I just couldn't bear the cold. But one of these days, I'm going to get an opportunity to do it where it's not the cold so much, it was the screaming wind. It was just awful. And I just couldn't stand it out after more than 5 minutes. But one of these days, if I get a better weather setup with no wind, I will try it again. And maybe one day I will come up to the Adirondacks and do it and check that out. Gary King's blank, medium-term forecasting solar radiance similar to 2010 based on the 11-year solar cycle. It's interesting because that conversation did also come up on Twitter by a few people that follow it, and some reputable folks that I respect also, kind of were paying attention to that sort of thing. That is something that I have to learn more about, which is another thing on my list for the off season. Yes, Techman, you're correct with respect to the Weather Channel. Yeah, it's off the models. They really have, there isn't a whole lot of human input in a lot of what they do, as I've been told, with regards to forecasts, particularly on the apps, which are basically, they're all model driven. You can't create an app to forecast for every point in the United States and think that there's a human being putting in those forecasts. It just doesn't work that way. And because these models change every 6 hours, in the long range, maybe not so much in the short range, but in the long range, you pull it up and it'll have snow one day for some day 10 days out, and then on the next model run, because the system was faster or slower or weaker or further south or further north, you wind up with a totally different forecast. And this is why it doesn't work. I have my own app, but that app is me. It's human contact. I write the forecast every day. I create the posts and so on. But that has all human input. Most of the weather apps that I know of have very little human input. Michael Burrell, February is statistically the snowiest month in New York City. Is that true? Actually, it used to be the snowiest month. Let me just explain what's happened. Over the last, they take these normals every 30 years. So right now, the normals basically from 1980 to 2010. During the period from 2000 to 2010, the average snowfall across many areas in and around New York City increased significantly from the prior 30. The 30-year average, for example, from 1970 to 2000 for New York City was 20 inches of snow. The long-term average is 30 inches going back to 1869. I calculated that. It's actually at 28.8. But what's happened is that in the period from 2000 to 2010, the amount of snowfall for each winter month all the winter months snowfalls have increased. The average for New York City is now 25. When we get to 2020 and we take out the 80s out of the equation, and it becomes 1990 to 2020 will be the new normal, you're going to find that 30-year average is going to go up closer back to the longer-term number of 28. January is now the snowiest month at Central Park by a fraction of an inch. I think it passed February when they redid the normals, but they're both very close. And Gary King's blank, thank you for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it. So got that, got a slightly better cigar with you and Nick hitting Super Chat. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you so much. Anthony Orr, I hate to ask this. Anthony, you don't preface it that way. Just ask. You're always welcome. Just got me to remember something I wanted. Are Central Park snowfall measures accurate? Many people said they have doubt the accuracy of measurements. Well, let me tell you a story. So back in the day when I used to work there, it was the weather office actually was on 50th Street at Rockefeller Center, 9 blocks from Central Park. And in order to measure the snow, somebody had to literally go outside and walk up to Central Park and measure. And oftentimes those measurements did not take place until after a storm was over with. Sometimes they never got to measure there at all. They would just measure someplace nearby on some car tops and kind of guess. That is no longer the case, by the way. Okay, now they are doing accurate, consistent measurements in the park. But this was once upon a time. There were staffing issues. You couldn't, it just was the reality of the time. It wasn't out of, any sense of laziness. It just that, if you didn't have the manpower and everybody was working, if you didn't have somebody available to go up and take the measurement, it just wasn't going to happen. So, yeah, I can tell you that there were a number of measurements that were missed. And also, by the way, there are other stations, particularly some of the smaller airports. I can tell you for a fact that if you look at Islip MacArthur Airport's numbers, they are totally messed up for snow, because up until the mid-2010 period, I forgot what year it was, but up until about 2006 or 7, if it snowed at night, it didn't get measured. There are whole snowstorms that are missing because the snow fell at night. I know of 2 instances in the winter of 2002-2003 where there were 2 6 to 10 inch snowfalls out my way that are completely not even on the record. Okay, as far as MacArthur's concerned, so their numbers in terms of their normals are totally off. They are way off to what they should be because of a lot of this missing data. So, it's just a reality. You try to get, as accurate measurements as possible. One thing I will say, that at least in the last, specifically in the last 10 years, you get so many snowfall measurements now by reputable observers that there will come a time one day down the road where there will be a much more accurate look at what is average snowfall and what isn't. I can tell you that the numbers on Long Island are totally, when you try to pull up a map that shows normal snowfall for Long Island, it's totally wrong. I've lived out there for 30 years, and I can testify to the fact that their numbers are wrong. Okay, it's much higher. The snowfall normals for Long Island are actually a good 5 to 6 inches higher than they are for places like New York City and even for southern part areas of the Hudson Valley. Yeah, you know what? It's not that they took the nights off, Reaver. The airport used to close. They didn't have the traffic at night, so after 6 or 7 o'clock, they would just shut the airport down, and it wouldn't open until 7 o'clock the next morning, so it was just closed. So if it snowed between, say, 7 p.m. and 7 a.m., it never got measured, unless the person coming in the next day, measured it when he got there, and, who knows? You've got, the snow by then may have compacted by a certain amount. If it was a snow changing to rain situation, it could have, melted away. I've been out there where we've had snowfalls of 4 to 6 inches before it changed over to sleet and rain. That all of that winds up being missing. Reaver 501, do I own a personal weather station? I do not have one of those elaborate ones. I have a small one that's just basically, temperature, humidity. I don't have, one of the fancy, and they're not even that expensive anymore. One of these days, I will put one up. My problem was, with my kids and my yard and everything else, and my cat and my dog. It was just, I never really got around to doing it, but I have been looking on Amazon at some stations, and they all seem to be, pretty reasonably priced and easy to get underway. Yes, Anthony, or correct. The Central Park, 17.1 inches of snow so far this winter, and that is 10 inches above the average per the date. Is that what you have? Is it 10? That sounds a little high. Where are you, Anthony? Oh, you pulled it. Yeah, I think that's a little high. The 17 part, I think I know is correct. I've had 26 where I am in Central Long Island. And Central Park has just about 17. Okay, so 7.8 inches is the average snowfall per date. Because February you're going to get another 9, so that's 6. Yeah, that's well, you know, that still sounds kind of low. 10, almost 10 for 19, 5 for okay, I got it, gotcha. That's probably about right. By the way, looking at now, wait, I'm starting to think about this. 10, 5 for December, 6, November, 6. Yeah, the normal, 7.8 above average for the date. Okay, now that's right. Okay, that makes more sense because you've got 5 for December, an inch, 5, 6, and then another 10 puts us at 16 at the end of the month. So, yeah, it's that probably makes a bit more sense. It's probably the normal is around 11 or 12 at this point. Yeah, okay, gotcha. Boston's got to be higher than New York, but Boston's annual snowfall, I think, is only about 10 inches higher than New York's is, if I remember, correctly, in terms of the long-term average. I'm not sure about the 30-year average, but in terms of the long-term average. Do I think the Weather Channel's apps should go out to 15 days, Matthew Goodman? Well, you know what? It's their app, and they made that decision. Frankly, I don't see what kind of accuracy you're going to get. I mean, you folks that are on here every day, you see what we go through when we look at these weather models and how much they change. How many times can we, for the snowfalls that we've had so far, think about the fact that several of them didn't show up in the long range and only showed up as we got into the short range inside the 5-day period, and in one case inside the 3-day period. So, I mean, I don't know. You want to put it there, that's fine, but understand as a consumer, you know, understand that you're going to get your accuracy level out 15 days. Let me put it this way. I would not plan something important around an app forecast 15 days out or even 10 days out. That I would never do, because knowing the volatility of models and knowing the fact that there's too much variability going out that far into the long term, I would never use the app in the long range part of the app and make a practical application to it. Is it true the tornado alley is shifting from the plain states to the Gulf states? If so, why is that the case? I've heard rumors that that is the case because of the jet stream pattern. Ryan, let me look into that question. I will get back to you. I know that there has been a longer-term decline in severe weather activity over the last 15 or so years. Part of that may have to do with the fact of the jet stream pattern, but I can't answer to the fact of how far, you know, is the jet further south or further north. So let me check that out. One thing I will say, by the way, one of the things that I have noticed over the last several years or longer, it's you know, during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, used to get a lot of storms coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, and that is something that I've picked up on. I've noticed in the last 10 or 15 years, you really don't see too many loads coming out of the Gulf of Mexico anymore. That and moving up the East Coast, they seem to be, you know, that part of the equation has changed to some degree, and it might be a cyclical thing. Got to discuss this with my colleagues who look at this stuff more in the longer term to come up to see if there's some sort of a longer term reason why this is happening, and if and when it's happened before, which I'm sure it is. I'm sure it has. Throwing darts works better than an app's 15 days out. Yeah, I mean, because you're using a model-based forecast that's going to change, and as I said, you see many times how when we deal with these models, things change. Maine Wanderer, winter weather came early, maybe in early spring with a big smile on your face. Well, I would say that's not impossible, but that's going to hinge on this weather pattern evolution that we see now and whether that comes back, whether the pattern that we saw from mid-December to mid-January, whether it comes back after this short break. So you may get the answer to that question in about 2 weeks. All right, let's see. We'll have to see where it evolves. You're going to wait always smiling until the weather station goes down to 20 pounds. You know, there are some smaller stations that are available for prices that aren't too bad and aren't too shabby. You should check on Amazon. Joshua, AccuWeather gets their 90-day data. Well, there's you know, there are the models. There's a European model that goes out, I don't know how many, you know, 1,100 hours, 1,200 hours, 5,000 hours. There are models out there that go out 45 days or long. In fact, I think there's one that has, you know, that plots surface maps that goes out for like 12 months. And I remember being able to access it. I don't think you can access it anymore, but I remember looking at it and just seeing how insanely ridiculous it all was. But there's no practicalness to it. I think because all of us, those of us here that are snow lovers, are just basically trying to grasp at anything that shows a snowstorm whenever it is, even though we know full well that 12 hours later or 24 hours later, whenever the next model run comes, there's a 99.9% chance of it not being there. I do use Tropical Tidbits. I think it's one of the best sites out there. Reaver 501. Most but not all models are available, and he's been adding some more. He just added the German model. If you look under global, it's called Icon, ICON. He also added a high resolution, I believe it's the high resolution RGEM model. I call it the H drops, and that's under the mesoscale, so you might want to check that out. And the UCMED is not available to the public, believe it or not. You have to go on the UCMED site to see it, and I don't think we're allowed to share it either. But you know, this is, you would think that they would at least let you share some of the stuff. We're very fortunate in this country, you know, here in the United States, that we have all of this stuff that we can look at from our weather service. You know, we might not have the best model in the world, but you know what? We do have a government, you know, we do happen to have NOAA and the government providing out all this information for free, which is great. And you know, that's important. And you know, I encourage those of you who are you know, across the pond in other countries to lobby them to improve their websites and do the same thing, okay? Because that's a good thing. Central Park normal is 10.1 to date. 17.9 is their total. 7.8 inches above normal. Correct. Got you. Let's see. It's 40 at the moment. I'm just trying to find the thread back. We used to say the Gulf is open for business, Raymond Miller. Yes, we used to say that. The Gulf is open. I remember clearly we would say the Gulf was open with moisture flowing out, the Gulf is closed. And it seems more often than not lately, you know, in the last number of years, that the Gulf has been has had almost a boilerplate over it, because you just rarely have seen lows come out of the Gulf of Mexico the way they used to come out in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. Yeah, David Schwartz, I am not for privatization. There'd be a big fight over that if that happened, because I can guarantee you, if they privatized it, all this stuff would disappear, and it would become, you'd have to pay for it, and that hopefully will not happen. Let's see. Joshua Pan, considering looking for some summer internship. Unfortunately, the LWX office only wants undergrads. Yeah, you know what? Once upon a time, they used to take high school students, but yeah, they usually want college undergrads now. It's a whole different world with insurance, with lawsuits, and everything else. You know, they want you to be in college. They want to make sure you're getting credit for it. It's unfortunate, because I had a number of high school kids as interns with me, but you know, back not too many years ago. But you can no longer do that. You have to go through the human resources in given departments. They just won't let you. Franklin Taylor NOAA's had a 13-month temperature precip predicting product and almost consistently a flop. Let me just tell you, by the way, with respect to some of these long-term climate models, there is a built-in assumption of persistence. So in other words, if you have a period where temperatures are above normal, let's just use that as an example because that's what we've come out of. We had up until, and I'm going to use New York City as a specific point, okay? But through, I believe, the month of October, we had something like 22 out of 23 months or 23 out of 24 months that are above average. There is a built-in persistence in the climate model so that it will continue to show above average in its forecast going out, even if that trend breaks. Now, if January is going to be wrapping up soon, this will be now the third month in a row of below average temperatures. If you go back to September, and you could go back on the Weather Service's long-range site and pull this stuff up. If you go back to September, you would see that the vast majority of long-range forecasts through the fall and through the winter and through this coming spring were all showing above average temperatures in the eastern part of the United States. Okay, and that has certainly not come to play, especially for December and January, maybe slightly less so for November, but nonetheless, my point is that when you look at these long range forecasts that go out 5 months, 6 months, 7 months, the models that they use have this built-in bias. They're going to continue to show above average temperatures until at some point they will recognize the fact that, hey, it ain't working, okay? So I would say that the longer range models, the ones that go out months at a time rather than weeks at a time, because the weeklies have seemed to have caught the idea now, the monthlies have not gotten there yet. So I would really, be used with a grain of salt any of the monthly long-range forecasts because of that built-in bias. Yes, those of you looking with the Joe Rayo show, we're trying to figure out a way to do this so that we both can, it works out with both our schedules and we're not exhausted by the time the night is over. But right now, the two of us will be on tonight at 9:15 on my Facebook page, meteorologist Joe Cioffi. So you can join us, join my Facebook page, and you can watch us live tonight, 9:15. So we do a 9:15 live Facebook, not every day, but we try to do it almost every day when both of us are here working together. We will try and do one tonight. I will try. We're also trying to figure out a way so we could, or we can coincide so I could bring him on here for one of the YouTubes again, which I will do. Okay. Daniello, yeah, I can't smoke a cigar on the live stream. I'm inside a building in a studio. They'd throw me out. But maybe one of these days I'll do a live stream outside. I'll smoke a cigar while I'm doing it. Okay. And we get into the warmer weather, I'll get my buddy Angry Ben, and we'll both sit there smoking cigars and looking at the models together. All right, folks, we're going to call it a day at this point. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for those of you who hit Super Chat tonight, Nick Cortez and Gary Kingsblank. I really appreciate it. And along the way, a number of you have done it too, and it's always appreciated here. Thank you. And in the meantime, just check out the latest website posts on my website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com. Join us on Facebook tonight at 9:15-ish for the Joe Rayo Joe Cioffi show, or what I call the Joe and Joe show. And we'll take a look at what's going on, and we'll get Joe's opinions on the longer term. And we'll be back tomorrow, same time, 6 o'clock Eastern time.